Jim Gehring from Brown Tool Auctions, and today I'd like to share with you some interesting examples of decoratively carved wooden planes. This is an area which is kind of a subgenre of tool collecting, and it arises from the fact that many users of wooden planes, of course, were very skilled and artistic craftspeople. And a lot of times they would look at a wooden plane and say, well, here's a big chunk of wood, rather than just use it by putting a blade in it and using it as a tool. Why not use my skill and my artistic ability to make the surface decorative and aesthetically pleasing? So we find a large number of these decoratively carved wooden planes. I'd like to show you a few examples. One type of carving which is very common on wooden planes is what's called chip carving. It's basically, very shallow. They just chip away at the surface. It's not deeply carved, and it's usually used to produce decorative geometric or patterns. Top of the plane, in front of the throat, you also have the date of this plane, which is 1846. We find a lot of these planes are not only decorated with abstract carving, but also are dated and sometimes signed by the people who made them. Here's another good example of chip carving. This is a rabbit plane. You can see the carving goes all around the edges, and this one is dated 1759. So this is a very old plane. And it also has SM, which is presumably the artist's name's initials carved into the left cheek. Besides the decorative geometric carvings, the chip carvings, you also find a lot of planes that have figurative carving. They're carved into the shapes of people or animals. Here's one of my favorite examples from this auction. It's a shave. You can see it's not a bench plane, but it's designed as a shave. And it's got the two handles are carved into two different heads, one of which is long and one is short, apparently just because that's the way they thought it looked good. This one looks to be clearly European in origin to me, because this guy has a very French look. He's got the little goatee and the mustache and the little French cap. It kind of looks like Claude Rains in Casablanca. And on the other side, we just have another smaller head on the other end. And the throat is carved out in a decorative manner as well, with kind of rope carving around the edges. Besides people, you find a lot of planes that are carved in the shape of animals, or carved with animals as decorations. Here's a nice frog crouching on the front of a plane. This one, and here's another one that has some sort of a, looks like, I'm not sure what kind of, if it's an animal or some kind of a spirit mask or something. This one, like the frog, to me, both have a very definitely African or maybe oceanic look to them. This one in particular is not only carved, as you see, it's also painted blue and green, and a lot of the paint has survived. These are both basically the same type of bench plane as well, which is more of an Asian type. The cutter goes in here. It's held in place by a wooden wedge against this iron bar that goes across it. Both of them are missing their cutters and their wedges. In addition, this one probably had handles on the back like this one originally, which are now missing. So a lot of times, these are very old planes, and a lot of times they will be missing a few parts. But again, we're not getting them to use. These are being collected as works of folk art. It's very typical of European planes to have a horn in the front. American planes or British planes tend to have a knob up front. European planes tend to have a horn, and that's a good place for artists to exercise their skill. I'm not sure what this is supposed to be. Sometimes I think it looks kind of like a rooster, but it also maybe looks like some kind of a, I don't know, sea monster maybe. You notice that along the sides we've got carvings, relief carvings of what kind of looks like some kind of a aquatic animal. So I'm not sure what it's supposed to be, but and you also notice they've put this hole in all the way through the body and a square hole in the top. Again, purely for decorative purposes. It serves no other function. Another thing about this plane, which we'll see in some of the others, is another area that's ripe for decoration is the throat of the plane. And here you can see, rather than just have a simple opening, they've actually done decorative carving around the throat. Speaking of horns, here's one that the horn is not carved in a decorative manner, but they've inserted a piece of ivory here. So it's got an ivory horn, and they do have some some deeper chip carving along the base here, and also some decorative carving in the throat. Here's a really good example of one that's got a decorative carving in the throat. You see how elaborately this is carved out with this kind of three-pointed figure here, and if you can see inside there, you've got decorative carving down there as well. What's really nice about this guy is that they carved the wedge that holds the blade in place in the same shape to kind of mirror that shape. And not only that, then they actually went to all the trouble of cutting the blade itself, the cutter, to kind of match the outline of the wedge. So again, it makes it for a particularly attractive plane. One thing to notice about this plane as well, I should mention, is you've got these lines on the side. This is not decoration. These are the lines which are in there to guide the maker in cutting the throat through the body of the plane. You can see they track the outline of the wedge. So those are not decoration. Those are functional. A lot of these planes have a religious theme to them. Here's a really nice jointer that has got some deep carving on it. Two biblical scenes. This is the Annunciation, where there's the Virgin Mary with the angels, and down here we have Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And according to the carving on the side, this plane dates back to 1847. It's got the date on it and also the name, which appears to be a German name. And again, that's consistent with the fact that we've got a front horn like that, which is very consistent with European practice. Here's a nice one, another jointer, really big, heavy, solid piece of wood. In addition to the carving, and you can see it's got the decorative chip carving down both cheeks, all along the top. It's got the carved throat that we were talking about. You see the wedge is in a very decorative shape. It's also got, and I don't know how well this will show up, but there's a lot of nail heads through here that are part of the decoration. They become part of the pattern. Little nail heads all the way through here, and also on the wedge itself. This metal knob is actually not a knob for holding the plane. This type of plane it doesn't really have enough of a hold to put a grip on there. What that is primarily intended for is what we call a strike button. And it's metal, it's not wood. And rather than being designed to grip, its purpose is that the user, because when you put these blades in there, they can get really, you want to jam them in good and tight so they don't move, and then you need to loosen them up. So a lot of these older planes will have a strike button, which is intended to be hit by a hammer or a mallet in order to shake the blade loose and not damage the plane. In particular, nobody would want to, a lot of times you'll see these planes that are really dented up, particularly on the heel, where people have beat on them with a hammer in order to knock the blade loose. But by hitting that, you can avoid having to do that, which would be particularly desirable with such an elaborately and beautifully decorated plane as this one. Here's one that doesn't have any surface carving, but they've just done a really exceptional job of carving little scroll work into all the edges. The wedge, and then the back, and then in the front here and there, kind of a wave-like look to it. This is a nice piece of boxwood, and it's a convex soled rabbet plane. Beautiful piece of boxwood and some very nice carving. And in addition to carving the surface, you also find some of these planes that are just made out of laminated or inlaid wood. Here's a very nice example. It's laminated. It looks like it's probably maple and rosewood, and then it's got these zigzag laminations inserted in up there as well. So again, another method of carving instead of just taking a wooden plane and putting carving on the surface, you start with a piece of decoratively inlaid or laminated wood. Anyhow, I think all of these are just beautiful examples, and they're all going to be for sale at our auction on April 1st in York, Pennsylvania, and we would hope to see you there.